Good morning. I'm Reverend Michelle Scott-Huffman. My pronouns are she, her, and I'm the minister here at First Unitarian Universalist Church. This morning, we're celebrating one of our welcoming renewal services, where we remember our commitment to LGBTQ inclusion in our congregation and our community, and where we think together about the practices that make us welcoming. We've been talking about resilience this month. Resilience is a topic that I get to talk a lot about with the young adults in my life in the campus ministry world, and I'm thankful for it. In October of last year, Ecclesia held a special worship service to recognize LGBTQ History Month on campus, and we called it Pride, Praise, and Protest. And I invited one of our students to share an original poem as a part of the liturgy of that service, and she agreed. I want to share that piece with you here today because I think it's a beautiful testimony to the resilience that she has found in the midst of ongoing discrimination and marginalization. So this is Sydney Grimes, a young adult who is both Black and gay, and sometimes feels what some have called multiple minority stress. But in this poem, she shares a moment of clarity about her intersecting identities and stepping into her own power.
Hi. Okay, hi everyone. My name is Sydney. I'm the LGBTQ queer minister for Ecclesia, and I wrote a poem that I want to read. I've never read my poem out loud before, so bear with me. Come on, it's called Free. What does it mean to be free? Does it mean to flee everything we've ever known, recreating, reclaiming our throne, fixing our crown, aligning our chakras so our feet feel home when they touch the ground? Is that what it means to be free? See, to me, being free is letting go of all expectations, no longer fixating on the past or what should have been. Realignment. If it comes, it comes. If it goes, let it go. It's easier said than done, but the universe will never fold on you, and that's facts. To be free means to be without restriction, an eye-opening vision where ears are open to listen and not open for condemning. I have this vision of living my life with no care in the world, no rules of religion, not wishing on a shooting star because it's already headed my way. A life of freedom for me has no opposition. No oppressor lives in my story. My life I'm creating for myself will never go extinct because I find myself in the trees and so many everlasting things. I inhale wildflowers in the spring. I have these wings that I can't quite get to work yet. I see myself as that butterfly, starting in a cocoon, shedding layers and layers until my mind just can't stand the barriers of this shell. I have to fly. I have places to go. I will no longer let the fears of my mind, the opinions of others get in the way of my flight. I literally have to fight my way out of this shell, out of this hell. I have to be free to go wherever I please. I have to be free to live in my identities. I have to be free. I have to let go. I have to break out of this cocoon and flourish. There is no room to be malnourished. There is only room to encourage it. I'm tired of staring at an empty pot with nothing in it to pour into others. Something has got to give. Someone has got to live. I no longer place myself in a box. I don't wish to fit into your idea of what a woman is supposed to look like, who a woman is supposed to love, how women are supposed to love. I am breaking every rule anyone has ever made for normalcy. I am non-conformity. I am so free. I am so soothing like honey and warm tea. I radiate love always, always. I am the sea. I match the phases of the moon. I am the Sunday dinner you look forward to when the clock strikes noon. I am moving energy like a monsoon. You can't keep me contained. My life does not need to be explained. I will not be contained. I will not be restrained, but I am free of everything you ever wanted me to be. That's it. Okay.
So in her poem, which she simply titled Free, Sydney talks about the struggle to step out of the boxes that society has created for her and refusing to be reduced to one thing or another, but rather stepping into the fullness of who she is and living that truth even in spaces where that truth may not be accepted or encouraged. A couple of lines that really stand out to me are the ones where she speaks of the depth of her struggle by saying, "I'm tired of stirring an empty pot with nothing in it to pour into others." And the one where she said that she can't quite get these wings to work yet. But then there's also the piece at the end where she talks about her freedom. She says, "My life does not need to be explained. It will not be contained. I will not be restrained, but I am free of everything you ever wanted me to be." The source of her freedom is self-determination and making a choice to not try to live in the system created to keep her in a particular place, but living authentically in her truth regardless of the consequences. And unfortunately, we still live in a world where there will be negative consequences for any of us who decide to live our truth when our truth is outside of that which the community has deemed appropriate for us. Even so, this self-determination is an incredibly important step. According to the Greater Good Science Center at UC Berkeley, mental resources like determination, self-worth, and kindness are what make us resilient, able to cope with adversity and push through challenges in the pursuit of opportunities. And while resilience helps us to recover from loss and trauma, it offers much more than that. True resilience fosters well-being, an underlying sense of happiness, love, and peace. And remarkably, as you internalize experiences of well-being, that builds inner strength, which in turn makes you more resilient. So well-being and resilience promote each other in an upward spiral. Honestly, it's exciting to think of the possibility of people from any marginalized group experiencing an upward spiral of well-being and resilience, especially in light of the relative ease with which we can find ourselves in a downward spiral of doubt and self-loathing that is often the result of internalized homophobia, internalized racism, and a general feeling of never quite measuring up to the expectations of the world around us. So what is our role as community in supporting the upward spiral and reducing the external factors that contribute to the downward spiral? The Sufi mystic Hafiz wrote, "I once asked a bird, 'How is it that you fly in this gravity of darkness?' And she responded, 'Love lifts me.'" When our individual strength fails us, where do we turn? How do we nourish ourselves and others to move toward well-being and resilience? According to the little bird, it's the love of a community that helps lift it out of the gravity of darkness. When Sydney says in her poem, "I can't quite get these wings to work," it's the love of her community that lifts her out of the gravity of darkness. So what if love was our primary way of being in community with each other? What if it were our common language and our most natural expression of both our selfhood and community? It would require a significant shift from our normal ways of being, which often revolve around power, positioning, and control. Gibran Rivera, writing for the Interaction Institute for Social Change, says, "Focusing on questions of power keeps us in a relatively measurable world. It allows us to gauge wins and losses. It helps us to understand struggles for control and domination. But entering the question of love takes us into spaces that are immeasurable and make a direct demand on our own personal transformation." Rivera, following the writings of Bell Hooks, thinks about how we transform questions of power by viewing them through a lens of love. He goes on to say, "I am interested in the type of social change that will succeed, that will help to redefine how we are with one another in ways that reverberate through society at large. I am interested in freedom, and I'm looking for ways to place love at the center of this quest. An ethic of love demands that we understand that how we get there is as important as getting there. When we respond to the call of love as a practice of freedom, we are snapped out of the idea that we will have community when we are politically free, and demands that we build community in order to become free. It is that last line that I want to think about today. When we respond to the call to love as a practice of freedom, we're snapped out of the idea that we will have community when we are politically free, and demands that we build community in order to become free. What does it look like to build community in order to become free? What kind of community frees people rather than binds them? Rivera and Bell Hooks and Grace Lee Boggs and so many others would say that a community built on love frees us. But I think it's sometimes hard to think of love as a community because we've been trained to think of it in terms of individual, intimate relationships, and not necessarily as a guiding value in the broader community, not one that we can put flesh on anyway. We have somehow thought that love as a guiding value in systems larger than a family is messy, unpredictable, and weak. Martin Luther King Jr. spoke of this love in his book, Where Do We Go Now? Chaos or Community? He said, one of the greatest problems of history is that the concepts of love and power are usually contrasted as polar opposites. Love is identified with a resignation of power, and power with a denial of love. What is needed is a realization that power without love is reckless and abusive, and love without power is sentimental and anemic. Power at its best is love implementing the demands of justice, and justice at its best is love correcting everything that stands against love. According to King, love is key to both the appropriate use of power and to establishing justice. So in honor of this welcoming Renewal Sunday, I wanted to think about love and community resilience in terms of allyship to the LGBTQ community, which, as it turns out, is similar to being an ally to all kinds of marginalized groups, and in a lot of ways, just good tips for being a good human and neighbor. Some of the simple but profound marks of an ally, according to many LGBTQ advocacy organizations, include being a good listener, seeking consent and acting within its bounds, trusting others to know what is good and right for their own lives, and believing people when they tell you they've been harmed, and doing what you can to mitigate the harm. In reality, if most of us put time and energy into doing those things, our world would already be a much more safe, just, and welcoming place for all people. If we're ready to dig a little deeper, there's a great list at allyship.org that expands on what it means to be an ally. So I just want to share some of those points with you this morning. An ally is someone who addresses issues and not just incidents, recognizing that microaggressions and other problems that marginalized groups run into are often caused by something deeper and greater, a lack of education, a lack of understanding, and that a particular incident might not be where the focus needs to go, but the education around an entire issue. An ally mobilizes and organizes to respond to issues without prompting from a target group member. When something happens in the community, just last week, there was an act of violence in Springfield against a gay couple. When those kind of things happen in the community, an ally is a person who stands up and starts calling out the need for change and starts doing the work among their peers instead of waiting for the marginalized community to do that or to call for that help. An ally is someone who is willing to take risks that may affect one's place, position, and authority within their dominant group. Someone who's willing to make a correction on the spot and to deal with the fallout that might happen from that in the middle of a meeting or a conversation. An ally is a visible, active, vigilant, and public person. There are no allies in secret. You can't be a closeted ally to the LGBTQ community. An ally is willing to recognize the inherent privilege and power of being a member of the dominant group and views membership in the dominant group as an opportunity to bring about change. And an ally is proactive more often than reactive, is always intentional, overt, vocal, consistent, and public about being an ally. And as I said, there's no such thing as being a passive or silent ally. And I thought that list was really helpful for helping us to understand how we can be an ally in the world to our LGBTQ plus neighbors, but also to people of many different marginalized groups. You can just replace the group in a lot of cases, and it takes the same thing for us to look out for those who are marginalized among us, for those to use our privilege in dominant spaces to call for change and transformation. And the other list that I wanted to share from Allyship is this: what members of targeted groups should be able to expect from their allies. The first one is respect, support, and recognition. We should all be able to expect respect, support, and recognition from the people around us. And in fact, that's a part of our principles as UUs, to respect the inherent worth and dignity of every person, to respect, to respect, to respect. Members of targeted groups expect that their ally friends will use their power to promote social justice. They expect that their friends who consider themselves allies will do their own work. This is the thing that sometimes is hard for people of dominant groups. We want to learn from the people who have experienced the pain, the people who are from the oppressed and marginalized community. And a big part of our work is to understand that we have this wealth of resources available to us, that books have been written and documentaries and podcasts and blog posts and all the things that we could possibly want are available at our fingertips. And sometimes as people in a dominant group, we will just say, but if they would just show up for the conversation and help us understand. But that work has been done. And now it's on the dominant group to follow through and to educate themselves. People in targeted communities expect from their allies that they will make mistakes and that they will learn from them. This is the practice of recognizing that we've made a mistake and not making a big deal about it, not making ourselves the center of attention, not making a further hardship on the person with whom we've made the mistake, but to simply recognize we made a mistake, correct ourselves in the moment, and commit to learning from that mistake. The reality is that our tendency is just to get defensive and not to want to do that. And I think that's mostly human nature. But I also think that as people committed to living life in the practices of love, that we can move past that. One of the other things that targeted groups should be able to expect from their allies is that they will allow the focus of the discussion to remain on the issue at hand without looking for ways to connect it, compare it, contrast it to other forms of oppression, even when the connections may exist, and that they resist the temptation to rank oppressions and to look at the ways that one oppressed group might somehow have it better or worse than another oppressed group. This list is one of probably thousands, maybe tens of thousands of lists out there about how we can be allies to oppressed and marginalized groups. And I think we could start anywhere on any of them and just pick one practice and work on it as individuals and as a community and make our space a more welcoming, just, and safe space for everyone. Cornel West has said that justice is what love looks like in public. And as people who claim justice in our principles and values, my hope today is that we will expand our practices of love to achieve it. When I think about Sydney's desire to be free in this world, and that of so many other people that I know, both young and old, I'm even more committed to the practices that make us whole together. the practices that build not just individual resilience, but communities of resilience as well. I hope that you will commit with me to practice the kind of love that allows and inspires others to spread their wings and fly, even in the gravity of darkness. May it be so. Blessed be, and amen.